I'm going to walk through this REOLINK 4-camera Trackmix PoE bundle the way I would if I were sitting at my desk with a fresh box in front of me, trying to decide whether it's worth the money for a real home or small business setup. I know a lot of us have been burned by cheap plug-and-play kits that promise 4K resolution and then spend weeks wrestling with laggy apps, blurry night footage, or a recorder that crashes under a handful of cameras. My goal here is to give you a clear picture of what you actually get, how it behaves when you install it, and who should spend on this bundle versus who might be better off looking elsewhere. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First, let's talk about the core of the system. For PTZ cameras that run over PoE, a built-in 2TB HDD NVR, and the software that ties them together. The biggest hesitation most buyers have is whether the whole package will work smoothly out of the box or whether you'll end up spending a weekend reconfiguring IP addresses and firmware. In my experience, REOLINK's approach is fairly straightforward. You connect the NVR to your router with a single Ethernet cable, plug each camera into the PoE switch that comes with the kit, and the NVR automatically discovers the cameras within a minute. There's no need to manually assign static IPs unless you have a very complex network, which is a relief for anyone who isn't an IT specialist. The user interface on the NVR's front panel is minimalist, a small LCD that shows live feeds and a few buttons for navigation. Most of the heavy lifting happens in the REOLINK app or web portal. The first thing I noticed after logging in is that the layout mirrors what you'd expect from a consumer-grade security system: a grid of thumbnails, a drop-down to select individual cameras, and a timeline for playback. There is a bit of menu friction when you dive into advanced settings like motion zones or tracking thresholds. You have to click through a couple of submenus, and the terminology isn't always intuitive, e.g., tracking sensitivity versus tracking confidence. However, once you get past that initial learning curve, the settings stay where you left them, which means you won't have to reconfigure every time you reboot. Now onto the cameras themselves. Each unit is a 4K PTZ with a 6 hybrid zoom, which is a mix of optical and digital. In daytime sunlight, the optical component shines. You can actually see fine details like license plates or facial features when you zoom into the maximum. The digital portion adds extra reach, but you'll notice a slight softening, which is expected. What matters most for a security camera is how it behaves in low light, and REOLINK uses a fairly competent IR array that kicks in around 30 feet. The night footage is clean, though not as crisp as a dedicated night vision camera that uses larger sensors. For most residential front door or backyard scenarios, the clarity is more than sufficient to identify a person or a pet, especially when you combine it with the built-in human/vehicle/pet detection. Speaking of detection, the auto-tracking feature is a highlight. When the AI flags a moving object that matches your chosen category, the camera actually pans, tilts, and zooms to keep it centered. In a test with a delivery driver approaching the driveway, the camera locked onto the figure, followed the walk up the steps, and maintained a clear view even as the person turned. The tracking is smooth enough that you don't get the jitter you sometimes see with cheaper PTZ units that constantly hunt for the subject. The detection accuracy is decent, but not flawless. I saw a few false positives where a swinging tree branch was flagged as a human. That's something to keep in mind if you plan to rely on alerts to avoid constant notifications. One practical concern that comes up with PoE systems is power reliability. Because the cameras draw power directly from the Ethernet cable, you eliminate the need for separate adapters or solar panels, which simplifies installation. However, that also means you're dependent on the switch's uptime. In the bundle, REOLINK provides a small PoE switch that's adequate for the 4 cameras, but if you ever want to expand beyond the 4, you'll need a larger switch and potentially a UPS to protect against power cuts. The NVR itself has a backup battery port, but the kit does not include a battery, so you'd have to source that separately if you need uninterrupted recording during outages. Let's talk about the storage side. A 2TB HDD is built in, preformatted for REOLINK's video stream. At 4K resolution with motion-based recording, you'll fill roughly 30 hours of footage per day, which translates to about a week of continuous coverage. That's more than enough for most users who rely on motion triggers rather than constant recording. The system also supports external USB drives if you want to archive older footage without reformatting the internal drive. One limitation I noticed is that the NVR doesn't offer cloud storage integration out of